This is like the 500th time I've sat down to make this video because I literally don't know what to say. What I'm going to share in this video is so shocking and so disturbing. I genuinely do not believe that most people, especially Lutherans, are aware of the gravity of the implications of this. Speaking as a former Lutheran, I can assure you that most Lutherans are completely unaware of this history and therefore have not considered its implications. But as a trigger warning, I'm just going to say this video discusses a history of anti-Semitism in the Lutheran Church. And unfortunately, for context, I was raised in the church. I was raised ELCA. My grandfather is ordained ELCA. This history was never shared. I had no clue until about 6 months ago. Never shared in Sunday school, never shared in confirmation class, never shared casually among congregants or from church administration. Never formal or informal messaging about any of this. So recently, given my history in the church and my allegiance to its so-called values and practices, I decided, hey, I think I might want to be clergy. I want to pursue a leadership position in the church like my grandfather did. So I became rapidly discontented with the amount of red tape and bureaucratic oversight I was encountering when I tried to enter seminary. And so I had the occasion or took the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into the history of the church so that I could form a position for the purposes of application. And oh, buddy. To say that I was shocked is a gross understatement. I was shocked right out of my socks. So shocked, in fact, that I am now no longer Lutheran. Because what I'm about to share with you is absolutely going to blow your mind. I promise you that. And I'm almost certain you don't know about this history. So, I'm gonna get into this, and you can watch the longer video. I encourage you to watch the longer video on my channel. But Martin Luther, for those of you that don't know, Martin Luther was a historical figure. He is essentially responsible for an entire cultural shift in Europe in the middle of the 16th century. So Martin Luther was a German theologian and academic. And he was a lecturer and a writer, and he wrote a very important document in 1517 entitled The 95 Theses, or Disputation on the Power and Efficacy of Indulgences. Essentially, it was a pointed, formal critique of the abuse of power in the Catholic Church, to do a very, very rudimentary summary. There were practices going on in the church that Luther didn't like, but more specifically, he found them to be counter-representative to the teachings of the gospel. So as a theologian, that is his purview, that is his concern, and he essentially is responsible for initiating a complete divergence in Europe from the Catholic Church. Essentially, Protestantism came about because of Martin Luther. This is how important he is. His life is of extreme consequence to history. It's about as consequential as it comes. Okay, here's where it gets disturbing. So, the 95 Theses are not the only piece of writing that Martin Luther did, as you might suspect. I should also mention that into this cultural situation, Martin Luther's teachings and claims and philosophies are coinciding with the birth of the printing press. So it has spontaneously become much easier for big ideas to disseminate rapidly, to proliferate virulently. So he writes the 95 Theses in 1517. It just blows up Europe, basically, philosophically, culturally, politically, you name it. But he also writes something else. In 1543, he writes a text entitled "On the Jews and Their Lies." And this text is exactly what you think it is. This text is a raging diatribe, an anti-Semitic diatribe, in which Luther, with the same power and passion behind the 95 Theses, explicitly and aggressively targets the Jewish people, condemning them, calling them evil, calling for violence, you name it. And it is awful. I think when I found out about this, I cried for like a day. I was so disturbed. And like I said, this was not taught in my faith tradition, even though it forms the cornerstone of that tradition by virtue of the fact it comes from the man that's revered as the founder of this philosophy, this paradigm, this ritual. So, as you might suspect, this text is inextricably linked to the rise of Nazism in Germany. Cultural leaders in Germany explicitly praised this text for its wisdom and its foresight and its position vis-a-vis the Jewish people. So one of the thoughts I had pretty readily after learning about this was, where's the apology? And it is not until 1994 that the ELCA apologizes for Luther and his position on this. And I'm going to get into why this is a problem. But first, I want to read you a bit of the apology, and you can decide for yourself if this sounds like a real apology. A declaration of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to the Jewish community. This is, again, from 1994. In the long history of the Church, the treatment accorded the Jewish people by Christians has been among our most grievous and shameful legacies. Very few Christian communities of faith were able to escape the contagion of anti-Judaism and its modern successor, anti-Semitism. Lutherans belonging to the Lutheran World Federation and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America feel a special burden in this regard because of certain elements in the legacy of the reformer Martin Luther and the catastrophes, including the Holocaust of the 20th century, suffered by Jews in places where the Lutheran churches were strongly represented. The Lutheran communion of faith is linked by name and heritage to the memory of Martin Luther, teacher and reformer. Honoring his name in our own, we recall his bold stand for truth, his earthy and sublime words of wisdom, and above all, his witness to God's saving word. Luther proclaimed a gospel for people as we really are, bidding us to trust a grace sufficient to reach our deepest shames and address the most tragic truths. In the spirit of that truth-telling, we who bear his name and heritage must with pain acknowledge also Luther's anti-Judaic diatribes and the violent recommendations of his later writings against the Jews. As did many of Luther's own companions in the 16th century, we reject this violent invective And yet more do we express our deep and abiding sorrow over its tragic effects on subsequent generations. In concert with the Lutheran World Federation, we particularly deplore the appropriation in our day of Luther's words by modern anti-Semites for the teaching of hatred and incitement to violence toward Judaism and the Jewish people. Grieving the complicity of our own tradition within this history of hatred, moreover, we express our urgent desire to live out our faith in Jesus Christ with love and respect for the Jewish people. We recognize in anti-Semitism a contradiction and an affront to the gospel, a violation of our hope and calling, and we pledge this church to oppose the deadly working of such bigotry, both within our own circles and in the society around us. Finally, we pray for the continued blessing of the Blessed One upon the increasing cooperation and understanding between Lutheran Christians and the Jewish community. So, even if you're not, again, this is very high academic language, even if you're not an academic, I think most people would fail to see an apology within this apology. The tone is one of diminishment. The message is one of regret, not for the wrongdoing of Luther, but for the trouble that the church now has to go to address this atrocity. I'll try to give you some examples. So, we feel a special burden, the ELCA says. Special to the ELCA. Special meaning we acknowledge this, but only to the extent that it inconveniences us. And, you know, there's an introductory paragraph that I read, and then the first paragraph explicitly, the opening statement explicitly praises Luther's character. He's earthy and sublime. We honor his name in our own. He takes a bold stand for truth. This is all praise of character. Luther, as evidenced by his claims and his writing, is not a person of character. It's like, you know, I'll just continue. And then in the second paragraph, the ELCA harps on its own internal pain. Again, the pain of inconvenience, the pain of feelings that we feel as a religious body. Nowhere is the pain that such violent ideology has caused the outside community of the Jewish people. So we express our deep and abiding sorrow. We are sad. We feel very sad. And we must with pain acknowledge, again, it's about our pain, not about the pain that's been caused to you. And I think what really irritates me is that they explicitly claim that Luther's words have been appropriated by anti-Semitic groups throughout history. Go ahead and read on the Jews and their lies, and you tell me if anything's been appropriated. It is explicit vitriolic hatred. There is nothing to appropriate. There's nothing to reconsider. There's nothing to reformulate. There's nothing to rephrase. It is anti-Semitic. And nowhere in this document, nowhere in this apology, are Luther's teachings. By the way, the document in 1543, that was also a teaching. 1517 is not where Luther's theology ends. 1543 on the Jews and their lies is also part of his theology. That's my claim. Pretty logical. Nowhere is his theology called explicitly anti-Semitic and condemned as such. they subjugate, they subdue the nature of his writing. Because again, they open with a paragraph about his character, and then we must also acknowledge, if we have to, I guess, his anti-Judaic diatribes and the violent recommendations. But that was just, that's just him. That's an afterthought. We're gonna choose to continue to celebrate the earlier part of his work. And we're gonna continue to bear his name proudly, I might add. Lutheranism. And, so this apology comes out. This apology. It's deferent. It's deferent. It's not direct. It bothers me. Because it's all about the burden of the church and the church's pain, and the church regrets the sorrowful acts that stem from Luther. Not, this is wrong and this is what we're going to do about it. We're sorry that we hurt you. There's absolutely zero accountability. I understand that Luther was anti-Semitic. I understand that the Holocaust happened. I understand that mistakes are made. Big ones. What I don't understand is, number one, how long this apology took to come out. We're talking hundreds of years. At the end of World War II, at the very bare minimum, apologizing to the Jewish people for Luther's anti-Semitism should have been number one, priority one, first of all. Second of all, we should not be calling ourselves Lutherans. Form a church based on philosophical tenets, absolutely. And, undoubtedly, Luther was a brilliant theologian, obviously. His theology is brilliant. But we should not bear his name. We should not bear the name of a historical figure with this type of character. Again, where is this information in the church? Nowhere to be found. I'm willing to bet this more unflattering picture of the church stays relegated to strictly academic circles, strictly the academy. Because like I said, I've been in the church my entire life. I've never heard of this. And we cannot reach full maturity as a religious organization without acknowledging the truth. Just like you can't reach adult maturity without acknowledging the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. Church administrators and leaders are depriving their congregants of religious maturity by willfully nurturing ignorance of this situation. I will swear to you, if I were to go into a Lutheran congregation, any congregation in my community, and say, hey guys, did you know that Martin Luther wrote a pretty lengthy, explicit text on his hatred of Jews and how we should exterminate them? They would be utterly shocked, as I was. It's not fair, it's wrong, and it's evil. So I don't know why it took so long for the ELCA to issue an apology. And furthermore, as I've tried to point out, it's not even a real apology. I'm sorry that you're hurting. I'm sorry that this caused me pain that I now have to acknowledge to you. That's not an apology. That's a placeholder apology. That's a pseudo apology. That's a self-celebratory apology. It interrogates and changes nothing. So, aside from the greater cultural situation of this, I actually have to think about very uncomfortable things like, who in my family knew about this? And why didn't they do something about it? I'm left with the reckoning of, did they know about this? Did my grandfather know about this? He was in seminary. He had to. He was alive and well into his career in 1994. He must have been aware of the apology, which means that he was also aware of the history. Why didn't my family do anything about this? What are you going to do about it? Let this be an invitation, even if you're not Lutheran, to interrogate your position on pretty much any given thing. Do not take your assumptions for granted. Dig deeper. Find out things and then decide how you feel about them.